Welcome to the Baby Playbook podcast for another episode. Thank you so much for joining me. Hey, a quick one. If you are loving what you're hearing on this podcast, make sure you head over to the review button wherever you're listening, Spotify or Apple or on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so that we can get this out to a lot more people and get some really, really great guests on as well to share their tips and tricks. This week is a bit of a part 2 episode. Now, if you didn't listen to part 1 last week, make sure you tune in on that. I speak to Anna Robinson, who is a certified nutritionist and wellness coach, and she shares all about what actually happens to your body post-birth, what happens to all, the different nutrients and the levels and the hormones that go into this just crazy, back and forth, up and down situation after you give birth, and how you can use food and nutrition and really daily habits to try and get yourself thriving rather than surviving during those first 6 months. But Anna has so much more to share. So I made her stick around to record a part 2 episode where we're going to focus on the more wellness side of our life. Our life's changed so much. We've become mums. The focus at the moment, has maybe shifted to baby, and make sure that we're realigning that to ourselves and giving us the best chance to really just power through this period of chaos. Anna is also my sister, and I've been so excited to get her on the podcast for so long. So thank you for dedicating so much time today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this next stage.
Yeah, so I first want to start off with wellness. I think, for us, it's a really busy time, the first 6 months. You feel really stretched in terms of your time and your energy and taking care of not just yourself, but then also baby. We're really, really busy. So how should we approach even thinking about incorporating wellness into our day?
Yeah, I think a couple of things here. The number one thing for definitely that I'm always talking about is advocating for yourself and just simply asking for help. I think a lot of people, have this shame around asking for help and just advocating for themselves. Like, you are the only person that can create time for you. So, sometimes it might even mean demanding it. Like, whatever that might be, you need to try and carve out time for yourself when you can. And I get that that might not be possible all the time, but just being not ashamed to ask for help is really important. Number 2 would be, again, I touched on this in the last episode, is just not thinking about it from this all or nothing perspective that I see a lot of women think about these kind of things from. As women, we can be perfectionists. So unless we can do something perfectly, then we sort of throw in the towel and go, well, I'm not going to do it at all. And, it's always the little 1% things that make a huge difference over time, especially when it comes to, for example, just fitness. I always say any amount of minutes are better than no minutes. And that has been my motto for years. And that's what's really transformed my life, really, especially with having little kids. Even though my kids are a little bit older now, they're still little, like they're still in primary school. They still rely on me a lot. So if I can't get in an hour's workout, if I can get in 10 minutes, then I'll do that. So not going in with this all or nothing approach. Something that I have found really handy is when you're in the trenches and you have no wellness or health routine going, something I recommend is sitting down and writing down, say, like 5 to 10 things that really that you resonate with, that will make you feel nourished, that'll make you feel whole. It might be going for a walk. It might be having a bath. It might be reading a book. It might be, trying out some, yoga on YouTube. It might be doing a little bit of breath work, whatever it might look like. Writing down 5 to 10 things that are going to make you feel good, that are going to nourish your soul, and focusing on one simple thing every week and adding to that and building on that. And it doesn't have to be for a long period of time. It can just be one small thing that you focus on every single day. Even from like a more physical health perspective and, touching on nutrition again, sometimes it can just be simply drinking more water, it's the small things that compound and make the biggest difference over time. And when we're in the trenches and we have no idea where to start, overhauling our whole life is really a recipe for disaster and will never it sets you up to fail. So one of the best things you can do is all these little 1% changes that you know are going to make you feel good, and writing them down and focusing on them.
Yeah, and I think as well is like being realistic about it. Like, for example, this is so small, but I know when you told me about this tip of like, before you have your coffee, Nikki, I know you're not going to give up coffee because you love it, but she's like, you said, have a glass of water and like squeeze a little bit of lemon in it. And I'm going to be really transparent with you. I did that for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I realized that I really don't like the taste of lemon in my water. So Nick was like to me, just don't squeeze the lemon in it. At least you're getting the water. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like I was like, I'm not going to just stop having this lemon water because I don't like it. I just don't like the taste of it. I'm actually just going to keep having the water element. So it's like also being realistic. You don't have to be so hard on like every single rule. I love that idea of like you write down actually what really works for you and then you apply that to actually what you can achieve that day.
Yeah, definitely. And, keeping it based on what really sits right with you, that's really important. My list is going to be totally different to your list.
Mm.
Really, just things that, we don't want to necessarily go in with this approach of fitness and diet. It's really at this stage thinking about things that are going to calm your nervous system, that are going to really nourish you and make you feel good. And that list is going to be different for everyone. And that's what we want to be focusing on in the first 6 months.
And now I want to go into like a bit of the mindset as well that you need to shift. And we spoke about this in last week's episode as well, about the fact that, we live in this society where it's like celebrated if you can do everything by yourself and not ask for help. And it seems like a bit of an achievement. I also think that what a lot of us struggle with in the first 6 months, especially as mums, is like we really like grieve our old self. So we all of a sudden, our entire life has changed. We've really like taken aback by that. And for example, as a really simple example, like before I gave birth, I was like an F45er. And so I would go to F45 5 times a week. And that was like my life and that was who I am. And then all of a sudden, when I realized like I actually can't achieve that, it was like I had failed miserably at that if I
Yeah.
couldn't go back to that. So talk me through a little bit of more the mindset. Like how can we shift what our expectations are of ourselves? And then also on that note as well is touching on the mum guilt, which becomes really like a huge barrier for us to even take 5 minutes for ourselves each day.
Yeah, definitely. And look, at the end of the day, it's inevitable that we do go through that. I think it's also part of human nature to really, be sort of reborn again when we have kids, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I actually have no idea who I am. I think that part of it is almost really beautiful to go through and acknowledge in the moment. I know it can feel really overwhelming, but just know, as someone that has older kids, it really is one of the most liberating things that you will go through. And eventually you will find yourself and it'll be an even better version of you. But I think definitely in the moment that can feel so overwhelming. I think from a mindset perspective, it's really important to remember that you are still your own person. And I think this is what a lot of people lose in those first, few months of motherhood. They really forget that they are their own person. And this is something that I did myself, and I'm guilty of it. And I know you experience this as well. It's all of a sudden we feel like we've lost this complete identity of ourselves, and it almost feels like we've lost this physical person as well. So I think just always remembering that you are your own person. Yes, you've got this tiny little human relying on you for everything, but you and that person are two different identities. So really always remembering that. I think that's so important. And just knowing that, in time, it's so important that at some points you do put yourself first. I know that can sound really hard to explain to somebody in the first 6 months or year of being a mother, but putting yourself first often is actually going to be one of the best things you do for your children. that mum guilt of feeling selfish or guilty to prioritize our own needs is again a recipe for disaster and a recipe for burnout. Burnout is yeah, it's burnout is serious, and I think people don't realize how serious it can actually really be. And you know yourself. I experienced severe burnout in motherhood, and one of my biggest eye-opening moments was when I ended up in hospital with a nasty virus. I think it was 2 years postpartum. I ended up in spending 5 days in this hospital with a nasty virus, which was crazy because no one could actually tell me what it was. And I remember lying in the hospital bed going, oh my God, I finally realize why they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. I never ever got that phrase ever as a mother. And in that moment, I really, really did realize why. And that changed my whole perspective. It shifted my whole life, understanding that. And now I can truly say that my kids benefit so much more from when I prioritize myself. Something that I really struggled with, I remember when Maya was really little, is I used to go for my walks and jogs, and that was something that I loved doing when I started nourishing myself again. And she would cry at the door and scream, "Mummy, don't go." And I remember for the first few weeks, I'd feel so guilty. And I'd be like, oh, I better not go because I'm traumatizing her, which is just wild. Anyway, because she was fine. She was with her dad. Like, she wasn't being traumatized.
Dramatic.
You know what? Afterwards, I started, leaving her. I would just leave her crying at the door. And I know that sounds crazy right now to some people, but you know what? It was the best thing I ever did for her, because when I came back from that walk, I was so much calmer. I was so much happier. I was able to spend this quality time with her in such a better state of mind. Something that I don't regret a lot of motherhood, but something that I do regret is not nourishing my own mind and wellness earlier, because I was in such a state of burnout. I actually don't remember my kids as being babies as much, especially Maya, because I had Bo and Maya so close in age. And when Maya was born, I was just absolutely in the trenches, just surviving every day. And because of that, I actually don't remember her much as a baby, which is really sad. And that I always get reminded of that when I take time for myself, because I know that when I take time for me, when I come back, I'm so much more present. And when I'm present, I absorb these beautiful memories and moments with the kids so much more effectively, because I mentally am at the ability to do that. I physically have the ability to do that. And that's why it's so important that we never feel selfish or guilty for prioritizing our own needs as a mother, because when we're nourished, that benefits everyone around us. As a mum, we are the heart of the home. Everything stems from us. Health and wellness stems from us. The other thing that's really important from this perspective as well is that, when I go for these walks while Maya's crying, I actually want her to see me push through and go, because I want her to do that in the future. I don't want her to sacrifice her own health and wellness for anybody else. I want her to prioritize her own needs, and it's really important that we are projecting that as mums as well.
Yeah, it's such a great way to set an example as well, and to kind of give that context for your kids as well. I know sometimes when and we'll talk about exercise in a second, which it's taken me 3 years, but I've finally figured out a routine that works for me. The kids join in, because I have to do it at home. I just can't dedicate myself to an external exercise at this point. And they join in, and that really warms my heart, because I go, wow, they can actually see how important this is to my day. And that just sets those little examples from the start with them. Let's talk about exercise, because this is a really hard one for mums and parents in general to get back a hold on. And I want to share a little bit at the moment about you'll talk about it as well. I know you love your walks and how beneficial they are for you, but I've struggled for a long time in, as I said, letting go of what I used to be able to do in terms of exercise and like how much time I used to be able to dedicate it. And it was only really in the last like year, I wish I found this earlier, but that I kind of sat with myself and I was like, okay, what can I actually achieve? I'm balancing this, this, and this. And then I went, okay, what I can actually commit to every day. And if I can do more in one day then this is what the bare minimum has become, that's great. But the bare minimum for me at the moment is I do a 10-minute YouTube exercise. It's also free because I go, okay, at the moment, cost of living, I can't afford a gym membership. And then I do a 5-minute stretch. So that's 15 minutes. And that's like my bare minimum that I commit to 5 days a week. And once I did that, once I went, okay, I'm going to stop trying these like 45-minute clips or that always get interrupted with the kids or whatever, I feel so much more like I've achieved something because I've been able to manage that every day.
And you're more likely to do it. You're more likely to go, I'm going to do it today and every other day because it's achievable. And that's so big with exercise.
Yeah. So talk me through, what are some ways in which we can even just incorporate some form of exercise during that time?
Yeah, definitely. Look, ideally, I would say walking is a really great place to start. You know, I love my walks, but walking is actually so much more powerful than what people think. You know, there was one study that found just 10 minutes of walking a day actually uh, lengthened someone's lifespan by a decade. So this goes back to don't underestimate the amount of minutes that you can get in, whatever they look like. You know, if you have to walk with the baby, that's totally fine. Ideally, you do want to go on your own, make it your own thing in your own time if you can. But walking is a really great place to start from a physical perspective and also from a mental perspective as well. You're getting your steps in. It helps reduce inflammation in the body, which is really common during motherhood. And it also boosts our feel-good hormones, serotonin and dopamine. And as a mum, I can tell you that we're really lacking on these feel-good hormones. So anything you can do to boost these beautiful hormones, the better. And walking is a really powerful way to do that. And I love that you mentioned the free YouTube. I did free yoga on YouTube for years and I still do it at home from time to time. We can link to a great channel. I do yoga with Adrienne and I recommend this to so many different people, but she has so many incredible free videos that you can do anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes to half an hour, whatever time you have. You can do it while baby's on the floor as well. So just getting that in as much as you can, any amount of minutes are better than no minutes. And looking at it from that perspective is just so powerful. And finding what works for you, I think, is really important as well. It's easy for me to say, do this and do this, but the only way movement and exercise becomes part of your everyday routine is if you actually enjoy it. And at the moment, when people first start exercising, they don't necessarily enjoy it. But as you start to realize how your body feels after movement, that's when people start getting addicted to it. But you really have to enjoy it. It has to be your thing. So finding a routine that works for you and the type of exercise that works for you is really important.
Yeah, I can't count how many times and how many friends I've done this as well before is like you also I feel like at that 6 to 1 year mark of a baby, I did it as well. I go, okay, I'm going to get a gym membership.
Yeah.
And then because you feel like, okay, well, if I get the gym membership and I'm paying for it, I'm going to have to use it. And then really slowly, you can't go and then you feel like you're wasting money. And it's this like really toxic cycle of like you once again feel like a failure because you've set the bar too high. It's really hard to accept that, but we just set the bar too high. So yeah, as you said, like, keeping it simple, keeping it free, keeping it at home even, or keeping it local and short, that can really help you just kickstart just somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And also from a health perspective, I want to mention as well that, the gym membership and any type of HIIT training can also be quite damaging for hormones during this phase. So that's also really something that we need to be conscious of, that, any type of intense exercise in this phase of depletion is only going to make you feel worse. I get a lot of mums come to me around that 2-year postpartum mark, and they say, the last year I've been trying to do all the right things. Like I went on a diet, I started going to the gym, I got a PT, and then all of a sudden they feel so much worse than before they started. And a lot of this comes down to the fact that your hormones are not ready for any type of intense exercise. And to be fair as well, I don't think we need to be doing intense exercise to see results and to feel good. So keeping that in mind as well when it comes to gym memberships and PTs and HIIT style training, it's just really not the time for your body to be doing any of that.
That's good to know. I will take that I don't need to do that. Okay, so let's talk then about, that relaxing side of things. I know you're a big fan of breath work. I know, meditation. And I know that a lot of people, as soon as you say meditation, they have this idea of a blissful setting where everything's quiet, which is just not really achievable as mums. So how can we look at incorporating some of that into our day?
Yeah, I am a huge fan of meditation. Meditation has completely transformed my life personally. As a nutritionist, I love the power of food, and I'm a huge advocate of using food as medicine. But it wasn't until I introduced things like meditation and breath work into my life that I truly, truly started to see the biggest shifts in my health, both physically and mentally. And when I say physically, I was actually diagnosed with an autoimmune condition about 6 years ago, and told that I needed to be on medication for life. And that's when I really started delving deep into the power of food and nutrition. And I healed a lot of my hormonal and gut issues with food. But it wasn't until I started working on my mindset health and introduced meditation that I actually stopped having complete flare-ups at all. And I've never been on medication since. And I truly, truly put that down to reducing stress in my life and having tools like meditation and breath work to be able to do this. So yes, most people think of meditation and think that, they've got to be in this silent room, no screaming kids. And, or some people often say to me, oh, but I can't switch my mind off. I just can't, I'm constantly thinking, even if I try. And one thing that I do want to debunk about meditation is that you don't actually have to switch your mind off in order to meditate. The power of meditation comes when you choose to sit in a silent state. So just the power of going, I'm going to take 5 to 10 minutes to sit in this position and switch off. Now, switching off doesn't mean that you have to stop your thoughts. Something that can be really powerful is, thinking about, I tell my clients, think about all the thoughts that come into your mind as these bubbles. And, think about the bubble at the top of your head. And as you meditate, think about yourself just like pushing the bubble away and sort of telling it, I know you're there. I'm acknowledging that thought, but I just don't want to think about it right now. And each thought that comes in, you sort of push away like a bubble. And that's what true meditation is, because what happens is you're training your brain to say, I know you're there to that thought, but I'm just not going to acknowledge you right now. That in itself is so powerful because you are not letting that thought control you. And that's the beauty of meditation. So that's the first myth I really want to debunk. And secondly, you don't have to, shush your kids away in order to meditate. I often meditate with the kids around, and I love that they're able to watch me do that, which is also really powerful. And just acknowledging that time of being still and being silent and, just switching off and not getting to the next task or not thinking about the next thing. That's what real meditation is about. But if you struggle with meditation, something that I recommend most people start with is breath work, because breath work is basically you're sitting down to just breathe. So no matter what's going on, you're just focusing on your breath. Sometimes it can be easier to achieve this because you have something to focus on. And breath work can come really handy first thing in the morning because it's a really, really powerful way to drop those cortisol levels that we want to drop first thing in the morning. So what I generally say to people is once you get your big glass of water, I would, I know it's a bit cold right now in Sydney, but if you can, get outside and get some sunlight on your skin because sunlight is amazing for our circadian rhythm. It's incredible for our hormones. We absorb vitamin D through sunlight. Most mums are deficient in vitamin D. But while you're sitting in the sun, you've got your water, you start some form of breath work. And what the most effective breath work is generally box breathing. So you breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold in your belly for 4 seconds, and then exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds and repeat. So if you repeat that anywhere between 5, 7, 8, 10 times, you have now activated your parasympathetic state. And activating, most people, especially mums, are not allowing their body to get into this parasympathetic state. And this is where our nervous system is at full calmness. We're in this beautiful blissness of calm and our nervous system has been able to re-regulate itself. This is a really powerful way to start your day. Something else that this can come in handy when, your kids are having a meltdown, you're really stressed, trying to pack lunch boxes, whatever it is. And, you go, I'm just going to breathe. Take 3 rounds of breaths. That will instantly drop your cortisol levels and activate your nervous system and help you just sort of reset rather than this cortisol just, rushing through your body constantly. So breath work is a really powerful tool to have in your toolkit as a mum. It's also a great thing to do just before you eat from a nutritional and health perspective. A lot of the times as mums, we're eating on the go, we're eating with really high stress levels, cortisol, and when we eat this way, our body actually isn't able to digest our food effectively because we're in this fight or flight state. Our body is working really hard to sort of re-regulate itself, and all the attention is going to this rather than our digestive system. So that's when you see a lot of mums get bloating and inflammation throughout the body. And a lot of the time when we're eating during high levels of cortisol, our body is also storing a lot more fat from the food that we eat as well. So just a quick handy, tip from a nutritional and physical perspective, having, a few box breaths before you actually eat a meal is also really handy.
I really love that. And I think what's really great about these episodes that we've done as well is like actually understanding what's going on and how it helps, because I think it's really easy with social media and things like that to see like, your favorite influencers might be like, I'm having a much, or I go outside and do breath work, but it's like, it's not really until you understand what that's helping with or how it could make you feel or why it's really needed at this time that you might actually be motivated to, just try it out and just give yourself a go.
Yeah, definitely. And it doesn't have to look a certain way either. Sometimes it might just mean that you go into your bedroom, close the door, lay on your bed and take 5 box breaths. And get back up, you've reset your nervous system and you've dropped those cortisol levels. You're not in that fight or flight state, which most women live in. And it's really important to train your body to be able to get out of that fight or flight state. Because unfortunately, we're seeing so many women living constantly 24 in this state of fight or flight. And then, we're wondering why so many of us are just so burnt out.
Now, the last thing we have to talk about, Anna, is sleep, because this is a really tricky one, especially in the first 6 months. I think what we don't realize is just how dangerous sleep deprivation can be. And sometimes it really is out of our it's out of our hands. I know like you've got to tell your story about Bo. I love my nephew, but my gosh, that kid did not sleep.
Still doesn't
when he was a baby and still doesn't. And so I know you've felt this and like you've been through this firsthand where like it was just impossible to get some proper sleep. But what advice can you give us there? And actually, how is sleep going to really help us during this time if we can try and prioritize it?
Yeah. And oh my God, the topic of sleep. So sleep and I know it's probably less sensitive for me because I'm out of the newborn phase, but I do have to say that, yeah, we've had a child that hasn't slept and he's 8. So I can still talk about it. But sleep really is the number one pillar of health. I always say this. When we sleep, our body goes through this restoration process. It removes toxins from our body and from our brain. It resets our hormones. So much happens while we sleep. And unfortunately, broken sleep can really be a barrier to this. And that's why we're waking up, moody, irritable, like, just in a really bad state of mind. But what I do tend to see is a lot of mums, they're guilty. And I did this for years of, once they get baby to sleep, it's like it's the only time that they get to themselves. And all of a sudden they're binging the next Netflix show for hours. And I really have to say that I get it, it's the only time you get to yourself, but the way we need to look at it is those hours of Netflix alone at night worth feeling absolutely crappy all day? We need to be focusing on things that are going to make us feel good and in a better mood and energized through the 8 hours to 12 hours we're awake during the day, which is so much more important than the few hours of Netflix we get at night. So that is really important. And I know it's easy for me to say that now, but it truly is. So what I tend to tell a lot of people that I work with is, if you're staying up late watching Netflix, try start rewinding your bedtime in 15-minute intervals every single night until you're really up in bed for 8 to 9 hours. I know that can seem like a lot. And when you've got broken sleep, all of the hours that you can get in your bed absolutely matter. All of those hours that you can give your body rest are going to make a huge difference to your physical and your mental health. So, I get it, even if it's broken and all of that, just get to bed as early as possible to give your body that time to go through that restoration process, because this is just so important as women for our hormones, for our nervous system, for everything.
Yeah, I think one tactic that I adopted as well, which really helped us, I talk about this on episodes, but, we introduced a bottle really early and with Noah, and that bottle was allocated to be the dream feed each night, which was something that happened at like 10, 11 o'clock. So what the routine was that I knew I was going to be getting up during the night. So as soon as we put Noah down at that, like whatever it was, 6:37 mark, I would actually go to bed latest like 8 p.m. because Nick would be able to, my husband would be able to do the dream feed. So then I thought, okay, if I can at least get sleep from 8 o'clock to, let's just say the first wake up is like 1 a.m. or something, I go, okay, well, I've gotten 4 to 5 hours and then I can just like handle the rest of the night. I just felt like if I can at least bag one period of like a decent restorative sleep. And that's like an element of that as well is mums being able, and we just spoke about this, being able to say, okay, actually, I'm going to ask for help here. Can you please do this bottle? I'm going to allocate this to you, because of course Nick was sleeping through the wake ups because I was getting up for those other ones. So it's about like also working as a team and being able to say, okay, well, in order to do this, I actually need a bit of help. So can you do this for me? And then I'll be able to get up for the other. So to have that negotiation, do you know what I mean? Like be able to ask for the help so that you can actually get something in for yourself.
Yeah, and that's a really good example of actually prioritizing sleep, because most mums I see would, take that opportunity to sit on the couch and watch Netflix and do nothing. And not that I'm shaming anyone for that, because I get it. It's the only time you get to yourself, like your body, you don't have someone attached to you. But, I can honestly tell you now, you are, heading towards burnout if you don't in some way prioritize sleep. And from a sleep, tips perspective, there's so many things we can do on a night routine, making sure that we can add, if you struggle to fall asleep, you can add in some form of magnesium to help you do that. Making sure that you are off screens for a good amount of time, so we're not waking our body up, using red lights, which I find really effective. We got red light lamps all through upstairs to make sure that we're not switching on those blue lights. Doing your skincare, having a hot shower, all those little things that can help you fall asleep easily, because I know a lot of mums as well struggle with insomnia during this phase. And again, this is associated to nutrient deficiencies and hormonal imbalances. But having a few little tips and tactics that are going to help you go into that restful sleep, at least for the first bit of the night, is really handy as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anna. We've covered so much in these episodes, which is so great. Of course, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, this is a part 2. So really important to get listening to part 1 as well. So then you have a really holistic picture of, what your body's going through, how you can help it, how you can ask for help to be able to achieve things during this time. It's such amazing information to have, and such powerful information to have to equip yourself with when you enter into this crazy period of your life that we've both been through multiple times. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait for people to tune in. And if anyone has any questions, you can reach out. I love chatting to you guys on DMs as well. But I'm hoping that this episode can help a few people.
Amazing. You can catch Anna on Instagram at Nourish Us, and make sure you check out her 7-day Mama Health Reset, which is actually a really good way to get across all of this information and get so much more than just the information, but, a proper plan in place for yourself.
Amazing. Thank you.